Okie doke. Thank you very much, everyone. And welcome to the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board. Don't forget that the meeting is being webcast. And if anyone would like to review the link, then you can find that on the meeting webpage. For the benefit of any of the members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board will now be invited to introduce themselves first. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Councillor Andy Scotes, Beeston Holbeck.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Oscar Ali, representing Gibton and Hare Hills.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood.
Good morning, Sonia Layton, Councillor for Guiseley and Rawdon.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Raymond Jones from Horsforth.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Karen Bruce, Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad, Moortown and Meanwood.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Neil Buckley, or Woodley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adland Wharfdale Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Diane Chapman for Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
And I'm Hannah Bithell, Councillor for Kirkstall and Chair of this board. If I can remind everyone during the meeting to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, that would be ideal. We'll move on to the substantive items. Becky, you're right to go through agenda items 1 to 5, please.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, there are no appeals against refusal of inspection documents. Item 2, there are no exclusions today. Item 3, no late items. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. Item 5, apologies. Apologies have been received today from board members Councillor Katie Dye, Councillor Isaac Wilson is substituting, and Councillor Matthew Robinson. Councillor Barry Anderson is substituting.
Thanks, Becky, and welcome substitutes. It's a delight to have you. We will move on to item 6, the minutes. And Becky, if you can go through the matters arising.
Thank you, Chair. Minute 21, just to confirm that the Chair has written to Councillor Khan about the concerns members raised with regards to recruitment and retention, and that has been subsequently raised by the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board as part of their work programming. So just looking for members to agree whether they're a correct record or not.
Lovely. Can I have a proposer of the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Jones. And a second, Councillor Layton. Thank you. It's all about who gets their hand up first. Okay, work schedule is our next item at number 7. The KSI information that we've discussed around motorcyclists, I was tasked with taking that away and having the discussion with officers. And the data suggests where we thought it was going to be that it was pretty open and shut, that there was actually more danger on rural roads than the city roads, and therefore the bus lanes wasn't actually going to have a major impact. Actually, it's a wildly more complex piece of work and set of data than that. So the suggestion is that next municipal year, in the early part, we're going to do a more complete investigation into that, so that we can make recommendations that genuinely will make motorcyclists more safe, rather than jumping to one or other item to recommend. There's also a working group that's been scheduled at 9:45 to 11:15 on the 7th of the 11th to consider issues that emerged from the performance monitoring discussion, which includes unemployment rates and business support. This is intended to inform consideration of the inclusive growth strategy at the public meeting on the 26th of November. Members have been given that date in their diary. Please do come if you can. Is there anything that anyone would like to amend, change, add? Please don't add to the work schedule that we have going forward. Or are you all still comfortable with it? You all look delighted, so I'll take that as a affirmation. And then, are we happy with the recommendation to the next scrutiny board around making sure that they cover that motorcycle KSI's issues. Lovely, thank you. Then we'll take that as a recommendation and it will be put on the next municipal year for whoever is on that board. So we'll move to the Vision Zero annual update and the University of Leeds research update, and there'll be a scrutiny statement sort of all clubbed together in a ornate dance that is going to be this item. Thanks everyone for coming along, and it's our annual update on progress made towards Council's Vision Zero ambitions. And you'll see from the report that there is absolutely tons of activity taking place with partners across Leeds. We're also asked to consider the new Vision Zero action plan, so you've got a sort of a look back and then a look forward in the papers. Thank you very much to those of you who attended Monday's excellent working group with Paul Jeffrey from West Yorkshire Prosecutions and Casualty Prevention Unit on the operational use of safety cameras. There's a huge amount of stuff to cover. We've done a huge amount of scrutiny this year into Vision Zero. So I know members are already very aware of the excellent work that's being done. So I'll begin by asking everybody that's attending to introduce themselves, and then officers will introduce their report. And then if Chief Inspector McNiff would like to make any introductory comments, I'll invite him to do so at this point. We'll then invite Dr. Ibrahim Ozturk from the University of Leeds to introduce your key themes, and then we'll open to member questions on the issues raised by officers and Dr. Ozturk. And then finally, the last section will be Councillor Stuart Galton, who's here to introduce a summary of issues that were raised by his scrutiny board, and then we'll have a short discussion as part of that debate as well. At that point, I will take any questions, and then we will close the item down. I wouldn't normally give a contents of an item, but I think it's important because there's so much in it that people know exactly how that's going to flow. And if I can ask guests to remain for both parts of that item, or all three sections, that would be great. And I have already said in the pre-meeting, but if everyone can be succinct in their questions and answers, because I want to cover as many areas of interest as possible before we move on to other agenda items, I say, whilst taking forever to introduce it. So I'll move on to introductions, and I'll start at the very far end of the table and work my way down. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, my name is Jonathan McNiff, Chief Inspector for Strategic Partnerships at West Yorkshire Police.
Good morning, Kate Morris, Head of Transport Planning here at Leeds City Council.
Good morning, Nicholas Hunt, Traffic Engineering Manager and the Chair of the West Yorkshire Camera Partnership.
Morning, Lorna Crabtree, Partnerships Inspector for Leeds District.
Good morning, Ibrahim Ozturk, University of Leeds.
Good morning, Rosie Revel, Team Leader Road Safety in the Behaviour Change Team at Leeds City Council.
Good morning, Gillian McLeod. I'm Head of Development Services, and I do chair the Leeds Vision Zero Partnership.
Councillor Stuart Galton, Chair of the Environment, Housing and Communities Board.
Brilliant, thank you. And I've been asked by members just if everyone could speak up and bring the microphones closer to them so that everyone can hear. That would be ideal. Thank you. Okay, let's pass over to Gillian then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, very brief introduction, just key points of the report. So, in terms of the data, looking at paragraph 4 of the cover report, we are currently on track to meet our aim of 0 killed and seriously injured collisions by 2040, and also on track for a 50% reduction by 2030. We've shown a drop from 46 people killed or seriously injured per month in Leeds in 2022, which is our base year for Vision Zero, and in 2024 that had dropped to 38, as I say, which is ahead of our trajectory at the moment. I did just want to then take you to Appendix 2, which highlights those actions in our first 3-year plan, some of which we have achieved, some that we've carried forward to the second plan, some we've passed up to the West Yorkshire plan for regional work, and identifying that we can't deliver everything by ourselves, and some that we've taken out of the plan, not because they're not important, but we've allocated them as business as usual. So we have made significant progress in the first 3 years, but we clearly recognise that we've got an awfully long way to go to ensure that we've implemented a safe system in Leeds. So then, just turning to Appendix 15, that contains our proposed new 3-year action plan for adoption after this scrutiny panel, so that you've got chance just to give us any feedback you wish to on it. And then finally, it's just that we would love to hear from you as to how you were all managing to promote Vision Zero in your communities, and just to see whether there is any other support or information that you would like from the Leeds Vision Zero partnership to enable you to spread the message as well, and to help us make Leeds a safer place to travel. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan, would you like to...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, from a police perspective, I just think it's important to recognise the breadth of the relationship and the partnership that we've got on Vision Zero. What would otherwise traditionally been simply a policing imperative, actually you can see through the very many strands that we've got, actually how working together we can reduce the number of people that are killed and seriously injured on our roads. As you just heard, there are some activities that are clearly embedded with us as being normal daily business for our neighbourhood policing teams and our specialist road policing officers, but coordinating that activity on a local level, understanding where our key threats are in terms of the roads and those locations and the times where we're seeing these collisions, and actually being able to intervene there to prevent it is really playing dividends. There's a lot of work to do, I recognise that, and I think we all recognise that, but we know that we've got the support of the Leeds City Council elected members and of course the West Yorkshire Police as well to help us deliver that.
Thank you. And yeah, there's absolutely political support around Vision Zero for sure. I think one of the things that I'd comment on just from those introductions is the fact that there's stuff not on the report because it's business as usual, and that shows how far that Vision Zero has come, that stuff is becoming just business as usual, making sure people are safe. I think that's something that's really incredible about the process, is that there's really clear progress being made. Okay, I am going to move on to asking Dr. Ibrahim to make his points, I think. Yes, I am.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of slides, so I will share my screen now. So I hope it is working. Thank you so much. So I will be talking about a couple of projects that we are doing in collaboration with Leeds City Council and West Yorkshire Combined Authority. There will be some keywords, key challenges that we identify, but the main purpose of our research is to provide evidence that could be used for Vision Zero and provide evidence for intervention strategies in the next couple of years. So the first project we have focused on is around traffic safety culture to improve road safety across West Yorkshire. And as part of that, we have conducted a large-scale survey focusing on Fatal 5 and commuting stress. The figure on your bottom left is kind of showing the frequency or perceived importance concerns around Fatal 5. And as you can see, the number 3, if I can use the pointer, so 3 means that it is about the same level of concern in comparison to 3 years ago, and we can see that from the data. Only for failing to use seatbelt, there is some progress in the eyes of the general public in terms of the perception. But when it comes to the biggest concern, is the distracted driving has been seen as the much bigger concern in comparison to 3 years ago, followed by careless and reckless driving and drink and drunk driving. And the figure on your bottom right is focusing on commuting stress due to inefficiency and inconvenience. And we see that especially around public transport users, there's a higher commuting stress due to inefficiency. The other project that is funded by the Road Safety Trust focuses on the enhancing young novice driver safety. We are developing a risk awareness, hazard anticipation training based on using the VR technology, and that is based on 3M strategy. So we are allowing participants to make mistakes, and we are presenting them an appropriate mediation strategy. That is the figure on your top right, and we are allowing them to master the certain situations. As part of that, we have conducted a small scale demonstration in the University of Leeds, and we found that across the different 9 scenarios, we have developed the training program. We have made a progress from the visual scanning behaviors of the young novice drivers, especially around there are certain scenarios that is more challenging than the others, like motorway scenario or turning scenario. That is, we know that is much less common when we are learning to drive. It's called eSafe, Equity, Social Determinants, Antisocial Behavior, and Future E-Mobility. That is particularly around e-scooter and e-bike use around Leeds and West Yorkshire. And the project is targeting modified e-bikes, illegal and antisocial behaviors, and pressure around gig economy workers. We have selected a number of groups that are particularly marginalized in the society in terms of, for example, young male road users, minority ethnics, and migrant individuals. And we are also targeting the gig economy workers, especially because of the working conditions and occupational context around the pressure to meet the delivery deadlines or reliance on high-risk behaviors to achieve the targets. So we are at the start of this project together with colleagues from University of Greenwich and University of Sheffield. And for this project, we are currently analyzing the secondary data existing, and in the next steps, we will develop interventions targeted to certain behaviors. The secondary data we are analyzing at the moment shows a map of e-mobility incidents across West Yorkshire. You can see in the figure on the middle, there's like a hotspots at certain areas, and the final figure on your right shows the correlation around the deprivation index and the incidence areas. We see that there is a small but significant correlation between the number of incidents happening in certain areas and the multiple deprivation index. So that is the overall figures around our research. Thank you.
Thank you. I am absolutely delighted that you've come to the Scrutiny Board. I think it's quite novel to have academic research at a Scrutiny Board as well, so that we can take that into consideration. And actually, it really does feed beautifully into what Councillor Galton will then be speaking about in terms of the new project. And as politicians, we have to weigh up the safety of everybody. So therefore, the antisocial behaviour and the impact that has on the people around the bikes, and also the people on the bikes or scooters. So thank you so much for coming and presenting that. What I will do now is, because I don't want to curtail debate, is take any questions on anything there that we've had. Councillor Jones?
Thank you for that. That's interesting. My concern about your data is slightly on e-bikes, who we don't know who they are. There's no registration. They're not insured. If they hit me, I don't know what it is. The same goes for scooters who are on footpaths, by the way. I'm not convinced of that. So my concern is, the only thing I can say that I can see is that that's going to get worse unless legislation changes. So I think the aim is, how do we get to a position where some of these people will drive about with no insurance and the rest of it? And it's for the police as well, to be honest. I'm sympathetic, because I think the legislation is not fit for purpose. And I think that that's my concern, is that the figures you've got are fine, but I can only see it getting worse with the number of e-bikes that I see who regularly do wheelies and God knows what on footpaths, the dangers that occur to pedestrians. Is there any thoughts on that?
Before you answer that, because the first thing that's been picked up is e-bikes, it makes sense actually to slightly rearrange my contents page and bring Councillor Galton in now. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's pertinent what you bring up, because one of the areas that we identified for further work in the Environment, Housing and Community Scrutiny Board was that the phenomenon of Deliveroo and Just Eats has been so quick and huge in such a short period of time that actually the legislative process hasn't been able to keep up with that phenomenon and counter the associated behaviours that have arrived with it. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that that concern in the communities around the safety of pedestrians alongside e-bikes in usually district and city centre in terms of shared space with pedestrians was addressed in the Vision Zero strategy, because it has so far had a big focus on road space and the behaviours of vehicle users. And we wanted to make sure that the experience of people as pedestrians was also taken into consideration. And so there's a big ask for the national government to pick up the pace in delivering better rules that we can enforce locally, but also there's an opportunity for local partnerships to be strengthened and deepened at pace. And that's why we recommended that also in terms of the e-bike area. If you allow me, Chair, I'll talk about the pavement parking issue under a separate discussion, if that's all right.
If you'd like to come back in, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, we are aware of the issues around, especially for the incidents and reporting around that. For this reason, we are trying to be as cautious and as comprehensive as possible when we are presenting the data. That is one check from our side. The other one is we want to analyze the camera data around Leeds city centre to especially see the antisocial behaviors and incidents that are not actually reported. So we want to provide the evidence to see that there is a reason, or there is some evidence to divide those categorizations. And one of the reasons that we are talking about e-bike users and also gig economy workers to make the differentiation between for personal use and also for occupational context. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you'd like to come in, Lorna.
Can I just come in there? I know you're probably aware of the work that we've been doing with the e-bikes in the city centre, and for the past probably over 18 months now, we have been distributing warning letters. We've had them translated into different languages, but in the last 2 months, we have tried a different approach as well in the city. So we've taken advice from the national lead about how we can approach this, give it a different approach. So recently we've taken 22 bikes, and I'm talking about very recently, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've taken 22 bikes, seized them within the city centre. All of them people have had roadside checks by our officers in terms of the speed and the power. So that gives us a roadside check. We've taken the bikes, we've put them in a recovery storage place. And what we've done is reported them peoples for summons. At the moment, there's no figures on what's happened when they've gone to court. But we've also been advised that when they pick these bikes up, one, they have to prove ownership. If they can't prove ownership, we can destroy. 2, they have to bring a van to take it away, or they have to walk it away. But our legal team has also advised, which hasn't previously been advised, that once we have that person on our radar as such, if we've seized it once, the next bike that we take just automatically gets destroyed. So it's work in progress, but that's a really very recent update, just with no figures to give you at the moment.
Amazing, thank you. Anyone else want to come in on e-bikes? Councillor Buckley.
Just to be clear, Chair, these questions are not just about e-bikes, are they?
No.
Right, okay. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Jones said about this, and following Councillor Galton's remarks, I think it's a very important question, but that's not what I was going to ask about. My comments were on page 47 of the report, and at the top of the page, who is causing harm on roads in Leeds? And car drivers are colliding with another car, with pedestrians, with pedal cycle riders, with motorcycle riders. And the way it's presented, I realise that cars, because they are the prominent mode of transport, are going to be involved in most collisions. But nevertheless, isn't the way this is presented slightly tendentious in that everything is car drivers are hitting something? And it's all right in this bubble, in this board. We think, oh, well, yeah, this is right. But the people out there think, just a minute, this is not right. So that's my first comment. And then on page 61, there is an older drivers, 60 plus, and mature driver appraisal. And the inference here again, 61. The inference here is that anybody over 60 is half gaga. And now Councillor Jones laughs at that. But you see, I would have thought, and the police will no doubt have a comment to make on this, that drivers between 60 and 70 are probably the safest cohort on the road because they learnt to drive when cars had to be driven, not steered. And I just wonder whether this concentration on this kind of thing, again, gives a slightly skewed impression.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. I guess the beauty is that all of the stuff in here is really data driven, but I'll bring officers in. Lorna?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's quite interesting that you should bring that topic up, actually, because at the Vision Zero conference, we had a speaker and he was talking nationally, not for Leeds City Centre. But interesting enough, we put 17 to 24-year-olds in our high risk bracket. But actually, he said, I believe, I don't want to be, I believe he said 65 and above is just as high risk as the young people. And that is for a lot of different reasons. One of the main reasons is slower reflexes. A second reason would be eyesight. Eyesight is a huge issue actually for older people who maybe don't keep up with their eyesight checks. They can't see properly. And also particularly women who are elder, who may have been driven around by maybe husbands who are no longer able to drive, getting back behind the wheel, not having that confidence. So that is sort of a national statistic, not just a Leeds-based one.
Councillor Bruce, we use a structure here. Gillian.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say on on the older drivers, the project that we're involved in, it is around self-referral as well. So, you know, we're not going out, insisting that older drivers are tested. It very much is around that older driver self-referring and being able to have those conversations with family and friends. And as well, sorry, the results of it are showing that the vast majority are fit to drive. So, but I think it just gives that level of assurance. And we have filled all of our funded places at the moment on that project.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone on Councillor Buckley's questions? No? Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Just on the who's harming who, I think perhaps we could have displayed that in a better way, because I think normally when we get our plots at the Vision Zero board, we do get a plot diagram, and it does show where it kind of shows who is harming who in relation to the fact that we can assess through the logs of the collisions whether it was considered that the motorist or the pedestrian was at fault in relation to that. So on the actual logs of who's harming who, we can get a better picture in terms of who the collisions are between and what the contributory factors were in those collisions, and therefore in some ways apportion blame. Not that it's about apportioning blame, but it is about identifying where the issues lie so that we can try and address them.
I guess there's also a size element, like even if the pedestrian is to blame, it's often the pedestrian that comes off worse because they're not a car. In terms of Dr. Ibrahim, I'll come to you for your point, but I wondered also whether you could answer if there's any interest from the university in expanding your anticipation work into the older demographic as well as the younger one, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's a really good question, and yes, the answer, because we want to, for example, test our training program after proving its effectiveness across different young road user groups, different ages, and regarding the learning to drive or learning when they learn how to drive, there is at the moment, vehicles have different technologies. And we should accept that sometimes they may not be always reliable, or sometimes we, as a driver, we may not have the right mental model to know that which technology will be efficient under which conditions. So there might be some confusions around that. So I think there is that element that needs to be integrated when we are talking about new vehicles, new vehicle technologies. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thanks everybody who's here, and thank you for sharing your information. I'm substituting on this meeting, so I feel like I'm kind of getting my head around a lot of what we're looking at and the stats and stuff, and there's a lot in the report, so apologies if this is covered, but I noticed in the report that 55% in the agenda pack, we've got 55% of killed and seriously injured are on 30-mile-per-hour roads. And I was interested in your work around the whether different reasons for incidents have gone up or down. So distracted driving has gone up, wearing a seatbelt, it's gone down. Is there any sort of, I'm not sure the best way to phrase this, on different types of roads, do we have an understanding of what the most likely sort of safety issue is there? So, for example, on a fairly straight 30-mile-per-hour road, if I, as a councillor, try and get the speed limit there reduced to 20 miles per hour, I'm going to have a really hard time doing it, because people kind of naturally go at that speed, and the rules around how you reduce the speed limit there. So I'm just trying to think practically as a councillor, like, what can we do on roads like that to improve safety? Because if 55% of incidents are happening on 30-mile-per-hour road, it's quite difficult to get them reduced to 20. What should we be looking at? Is it distracted driving issues? You know, do you have any sort of almost road level data, or can we get that sort of road level data of instance, but also like what, given the shape of a road and the type of people that live there, etc., what the most likely safety issues are there? And I would just say, as like a quick comment on that as well, even if a road doesn't have a safety issue, there's a perception often that a road is unsafe, which then stops people using that road as a pedestrian, etc., makes people feel quite anxious. So, you know, yeah, that is important for me as well in terms of encouraging active travel, is improving perception of safety. Kids, for example, often get dropped off at school nowadays by their parents because their parents are worried about the safety of their kids, which adds a number of cars on the road. And it's also just not a good thing, I think, for kids to feel unsafe going to school. You know, they should feel safe getting a bus or walking or whatever. So apologies, that was a bit rambling, but there is a question in there about road level data and so on.
I think Councillor Galton would like to come in.
Yes, this could save time because I won't have to formally introduce the other item. I'm going to come in on the aspect of the fear factor. So one of the reasons why we came onto this subject matter on the scrutiny board that I chair is because we cover community safety and equalities. And one of the issues that came up when we were discussing with the police around what their activity was within the community, there was a frustration around enforcement. And it was basically because there are many people who wish to be pedestrians and their ability to do so is obstructed often by vehicles. And the people who use the pavement at that point, if they're in a mobility scooter or if they're a young parent with a pushchair, no amount of education can tell them what to do when their path is blocked. And basically, they've got to make their own risk assessment before they enter onto the road. And then they are subject to the danger of the distracted motorist that you've just talked about. And that's why we think that the accountability and the enforcement of the Vision Zero strategy needs to be just as important as the education aspect of motorists. And that's why we were keen to understand how the police look at their deployment to cover things such as obstruction of the highway, which has a huge impact if you're a disabled person, but might not be such an issue if you're not. And that's why we wanted to pursue this further in terms of whether or not this might actually be discriminatory in terms of how the police decide to prioritise certain offences within a neighbourhood policing area. And we hope to be able to discuss that further in a scrutinising aspect. We have asked to talk to the Leeds Police and Crime Panel. Unfortunately, they only look at aspects like this annually. So we're hoping to create something bespoke so that we can look at this further. But it comes onto the accountability stuff, doesn't it, really? Of drivers don't just get behind a wheel and go onto roads. Drivers also park up. And they can be dangerous in their behaviour when they're not in the vehicle, as well as when they're in the vehicle. And we wanted to make sure that that was an aspect of Vision Zero that was taken into consideration. And it might not have a direct impact on casualties, but we should also be thinking about people's daily lives. And if the fear factor means they're not actually going out of their house to access the pavements and roadworks because they feel it's a hostile territory, then we should be doing something about that in Vision Zero as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Galton. And it kind of speaks as well to the work that we do around planning and making sure that there's enough space in new estates for delivery drivers and such like to be able to park up. Who'd like to come in? Chief Inspector?
Yeah, I was just going to follow on from the query raised by a councillor. So when we're reporting serious injury and fatal collisions as a police, we have a primary and secondary causation factor that we look at. Primary ones are often things around the fatal fall, which is speed, whether people are wearing seatbelts, mobile phone use, an impairment through drink or drugs. So those are often the primary factors. Then the subsequent ones might be, as you were saying, around a distraction. I'll not say mobile phone because that's often a primary one in its own case. But let's say someone that's looking at their infotainment system. If you've got excess speed, the ability of that driver to then be able to react is reduced because perhaps they're distracted by another factor within the vehicle. So that's how we look at them. So we wouldn't necessarily say, unless any of my colleagues would see it differently, that it would be, for example, someone being distracted in the car. That would be a secondary causation factor. The primary one would be the fact perhaps that they were speeding or they didn't have an appropriate licence or training, etc., etc.
Thank you. Would any of our team like to come in on that? Because I know we have the Fatal 5 as opposed to the Fatal 4, and it would just be good for anyone watching to understand why that's different.
Yeah, so whilst the National Police Chiefs Council haven't yet updated to a Fatal 5, West Yorkshire Partnership has. So Fatal 5, it's well, they're in the report, but correct me when I forget. Speeding, distraction, which can be mobile phones, seatbelt wearing, drink and drug driving, and then the fifth one is failure to look or careless, reckless driving, with failure to look being like the highest element within that careless and reckless driving. So I think just going back to Councillor Wilson's question on the most likely safety issue on different road types, I'm sure we could probably manipulate the data to come up with it for specific corridors and routes, but overwhelmingly that careless and reckless driving comes out top on anywhere, whether it's a rural road, a motorway, whether it's a 30-mile-an-hour road or not. It comes back at careless and reckless driving, and therefore you need to look very carefully at the specifics of those issues. I mean, speed and speed compliance are really important. So whilst you might have a 30-mile-an-hour road, if the average speeds are higher than that, then speed compliance is very important. And yeah, there are, I think, we could come back with something if there were specific types of street that you were interested in, specifically perhaps those 30-mile-an-hour roads through communities.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you want to come back in?
Just very quickly, I just wonder if it's basically always careless and reckless driving combined with speed, making it harder to then change course. Is there too much? And if 55% of incidents are happening on 30-mile-per-hour roads, I'd also just be this. I don't think you have the answers now, but is there too much leniency in how we assess whether to reduce the speed limit or put speeding enforcement in? Because usually I think it's something like a certain percentage needs to be going over. There's a formula that they use, but if it's only, even if it's only 1 in 200 drivers that are, you know, genuinely a danger on a busy road, and we can all think of busy roads in our wards, that's still quite a common, that can still be several times a day or more where there's a genuine danger. And if it's combined with, and again, I can think of several roads in my ward, a place where cars are parking on the pavement, forcing pedestrians into the road, but that latter factor is not taken into account when we're looking at interventions, or and I've asked repeatedly for that to be taken into account when I've raised certain roads, and it's not. Or, for example, how difficult it is to cross a certain junction on a road. Yeah, I'm really feeling a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Galton's saying around you get to a point where it can feel a bit discriminatory around whose needs are being looked at when we're looking at interventions. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I'll bring you in a second, Gillian, but this is one of my mastermind topics, is speeds and speeding, because I like enforcing. One of the things that's helpful when you talk about that 1 versus out of 200 is thinking about whose responsibility it comes under. So if most people are not driving to the speed limit, then it means the road and the speed restrictions aren't fit for purpose. So therefore it comes to us as the local authority. If it's 1 or 2 idiots that are driving wildly incorrectly and causing a danger, then it's a policing matter. And one of the amazing things that the police have done, and the reason I wanted to talk on it is because it gives me a wonderful opportunity to shoehorn in the amazing training that members did this week around our camera safety partnership, is they've opened up a new, I think it's since 2023, the new community site. So the mobile camera vans now, where it used to be, it has to be a KSI, killed or seriously injured incident, or there has to be certain high thresholds in order to get that mobile camera enforcement out. Now, if you put it in as a councillor and the speed survey comes back and it says, actually, there's nothing for highways to do because it is only in that upper quartile element, we can put it through to that assessment, which is much lower standards, and get that mobile camera enforcement in our wards. And I've got 4 or 5 different places that I've managed to get that put in order to, as in they've gone through the assessments and haven't. Okay. Send them to us outside and you can speak to Paul Jeffrey, who did the training. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so just a couple of points, and then I will bring in Nick because it's very much his area of work. But just in terms of the industry, the setting local speed limits guidance, which has been updated fairly recently, but still in the industry, people recognise that it's not fully compatible with Vision Zero, because you're not deciding what the speed limit should be first, implementing it, and then working through any issues with speeding that might come in. Instead, you're looking at the current speeds and doing it backwards, I suppose. So there is a road safety industry call through PACTS, which is the Parliamentary Advisory Group on Transport Safety, to get the government to update that speed limit guidance in a different way, so it is more compatible with safe systems and Vision Zero. The issue on pavement parking, we feel very much we've had our hands tied on this one, because it was an action in our first 3-year action plan, because we'd given a consultation response on it just prior to the 2022 action plan being produced. So we had an action in to implement the rollout that came through government, but it's 2025 and we're still waiting for that from that guidance and that law change really to come through from government. So we're not, it's a difficult one. Do recognise the issue, but in terms of what we can do about it at the moment, it very much rests on it being an obstruction, which is only down to the police at the moment, who can deal with that. I'll pass over to Nick.
Yeah, as Gillian sort of like highlighted, the Department of Transport have issued national guidance only in 2024, and that was originally established so that a national approach was adopted, so that drivers were complaining that they were uncertain of why certain roads had a certain speed limit applied, and therefore they wanted a national approach so that drivers could appreciate the risk as they went into certain areas. In Leeds, we have adopted that policy, and where we can, we have stretched that guidance, if I'm honest, to the limits at the moment. I know my colleagues would like me to stretch it further, but within the camera partnership, for example, there's other districts within West Yorkshire that have applied speed limits that are contrary to the national guidance. And when enforcement and action has been taken, those people that have been caught speeding have been got off because their solicitors have argued that that local authority hasn't adopted the national approach. So we just need to have a more balanced approach. I agree there needs to be a national discussion in regards to that the new criteria needs to align with Vision Zero. Vision Zero isn't a West Yorkshire, it's a national issue now, and therefore that guidance needs to change centrally. Same applies with the pavement parking issue. That's we're waiting for the outcome for that. In regards to the concerns about speeding in localities, so 30 miles an hour, they all differ, if I'm honest. There'll be 30 mile an hour speed limits applied and it'll make perfect sense. There'll be other locations where you don't understand, you don't appreciate the reason being. In Leeds, we had a petition by the 20 Plenty campaign, probably over a decade ago, where Leeds made a commitment that we would make all our residential streets and suitable residential streets 20, and we've met that criteria now, so we're ahead of our West Yorkshire partners, and that's why I think from a casualty reduction point of view we're in a healthy position compared to our neighbouring authorities. There's work to do, and like we said, we've now started looking at district centres where there's greater risk between high volumes of pedestrians and vehicle movements. We are also at the moment looking to expand the city centre 20 mile an hour zone, because that's where the greatest number of pedestrian vehicle collisions occurs. And it's just not changing the speed limit. It means that design principles can change. We can put tighter radii that encourages slower speeds, etc. In regards to the camera partnership, as Councillor Bithell has said, the deployment criteria was changed some time ago. And I think probably with most wards now, there's a road that meets the criteria for the mobile community enforcement vehicle, and that's not injury collision based, it's speed based. So when there's a perception of safety and speeding, if the criteria, and it is a relaxed criteria significantly from the national requirements, we will do enforcement action there. At the moment, from a complaint being received, the road being assessed and meeting the criteria to get an enforcement vehicle on the street is around 6 weeks. So the turnaround from a reactive point of view is very, very quick, and the community appreciates that. We do receive quite a lot of thanks for A, listening, B, actioning the work, and then seeing enforcement vehicles on the site. So there is work ongoing. If there's a particular location that you want the camera partnership to assess, please do send them through. I think we've done about 150 approximately, and of them 80 odd have met the criteria. There's a commitment from the camera partnership that we will do 3 visits to each location, but if that doesn't get the reduction in compliance that we're seeking, we will continue to enforce those locations until it's at a level that we believe is acceptable from a West Yorkshire Police point of view. But then we will do ad hoc visits from that period on. So it's not that we do three visits and walk away. We will continue to do that, so we have a presence and we have that fear factor that on any street and at any time you could come across an enforcement vehicle.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. I'm going to bring in Councillor Shazad.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points. Great stuff that you're doing on the e-bikes and actually doing some enforcement on them. But are we actually working with the people that actually employ the e-bikes? And like now we've got a fast lane for pedestrians. We've never had the infrastructure because compared to normal cyclists, even though we've got the bike lanes, but the e-bikes are way too fast. Especially when they're not enforced, because I don't think so. We have the capability to actually check what power that they've actually got. And also, when you go to the local areas, there isn't the infrastructure, and it's all, I mean, it's all that we're having to pick up everything, whether it's enforcement or whether it's the pedestrians having to face these problems. But it's the gig economy, which obviously came through COVID, but they're not paying into any of this, any of the enforcement. What we actually doing, they're actually employing people where they should be checking what bikes they've got and what speed are they legally allowed to travel. And there should be something that they should have a record of every bike numbered or whatever, that if there was a complaint or something, because there's nothing there. Whereas if you had any other form of transport, if it's a bus, you got the bus number, registration. As has been said previously, are we not approaching the gig economy owners like Deliveroo, Just Eat and all them and saying, you're causing this issue, you're causing the problem, why are we having to fix it through our own costs, where everything, whether it's for the police or whether it's for the council, it's a struggle. So I think there has to be some sort of partnership, and especially in the city centre, a lot of the pedestrians do not feel safe because at the speed that they whiz past, and we haven't got the infrastructure. And I mean, even now, even for pedestrians, we've got a fast lane now for those that need to rush to work and get to work, but we haven't got that infrastructure for these e-bikes, and we've allowed them to come in without any legislation, and the scooters, and it needs to be definitely looked into, especially in local areas. People are walking and suddenly an e-bike or a scooter whizzes past you. They've got a mask on. You don't know. They could pull your phone. They could take anything, and there's nothing there, and nobody knows who it is.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Rosie and then Chief Inspector. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor, just to reassure you, there's a lot of work that's been done with some of these companies that are actually employing people where they're using kind of on an inverted commas professional basis. Yes, it would need some legislative changes because people are able to buy bikes that might have model numbers in currently. They get delivered to someone's home address, but there's no registration. There's no requirement to have a visible registration mark, and I know that that's been considered on a national basis because of pressure that's been brought by elected members and others on it. We do work really closely with some of these companies. I will have to say that some of their engagement with us has been intermittent. They often will say that an individual can subscribe to many different companies to deliver food on their behalf. So they will say at a point where they may be wearing the uniform of one delivery company, actually they weren't working for them, they're working for somebody else or in a private capacity or whatever it happens to be. It is a real frustration for us as the police, some of the lack of engagement from these companies, because broadly, what I feel is what you've already described there, Councillor. We're keeping up the pressure through our counterparts in city centre management, etc., to try and resolve this. But yeah, we are facing some challenges with what are large multinational corporations with only very limited footprint in our city centres for all the reach that they've got on the streets.
Just from our behaviour change perspective, as a travel behaviour change team, one of the things that we have done is develop relationships with only one of the platforms. So we have attended a few of their driver engagement sessions to talk about driver safety. We have in the agenda pack, there is the City Centre Code of Conduct that has been written specifically for the gig economy. And what we want to do is develop more over the next course of the next action plan, much more concerted pop-up events in the city centre where we, who aren't the police, and we will go and talk to some of these riders. It's not going to solve all the problems, but we're certainly trying to develop more education around the dangers and actually making it as safe as possible for those other pedestrians using the space. I think it is really important, though, that a lot of e-bike riders in the city centre are riding legally, so it's really hard to differentiate between gig riders and those who are driving antisocially, because obviously we have a very successful e-bike hire scheme. So we have to be very careful how we phrase a lot of the conversation, but I fully take on board what you're saying. A lot of the work we've done so far is city centre, but we do need to widen it to communities as well to try and pick up those other issues. It is a work in progress, but it is something we want to try and address.
Just before I bring in Dr. Ibrahim and Lorna, Councillor Buckley would like to make a really quick comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in reference to what Councillor Shazad was saying, is absolutely right. But I read recently that a lot of these delivery companies don't employ them. They're all self-employed, which of course dissipates any need to have all this stuff, all the regulations complied with. That's the first point. And very briefly, I would just say that the reference in here to towpaths, and when you walk down the canal towpath, there are signs intermittently which say pedestrians have the right of way. But in fact, in reality, if there are two walking down a towpath and a bike comes up behind, he just rings the bell if you're lucky, or just whizzes straight by. And it just makes walking on the towpath a toil of a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Dr. Ibrahim?
To follow up Rosie's point about the follow-up events, that one of the things that we want to do with the gig economy work is to understand the justifications behind certain behaviors. Is it because of the personal, the way of riding, or is it because the organizational or delivery pressure coming from the companies that they are accepting the deliveries for? So we have to make the distinction between the rider behavior and the organizational aspect. That could nicely link to the engagement activities that Rosie were mentioning. So,
Lorna?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to touch actually on what the councillor's already said. It is quite complicated because these people are they're not employed as such. They're self-employed and they have several different accounts, but we do work really closely with certainly one of the large companies that I can think of, the delivery companies. It's further complicated because the relationship I've built up with one of these delivery companies, they would want to know they really promote road safety. They're very invested in it because it reflects badly on them as a company. So they were trying to work with us as to how we can share information. If riders come to our attention, how would we let them know? Would we tell them if they were doing offences, see if we were seizing bikes, etc. So I have done a lot of research with our information governance teams. And at the moment, I've hit a brick wall because data protection and the laws around that don't allow us to share the information that we would like to share to remove these drivers from certain delivery companies. And that again is work in progress if there's anything we can do about that, but we are tied in terms of data protection to some degree.
Thank you. It feels like there might be a recommendation coming out of that around engagement with those driver engagement sessions and us putting the scrutiny board support behind that work. It almost feels, listening to you guys, that there's almost, do you remember the Aldi effect where you had to get through like 100 items through the till in a certain amount of time? It was a training thing sort of 5-6 years ago. It almost feels like that, as in, is it chicken and egg? Is it that the companies are putting such speedy things on them that they're having to do the driver behaviours? Or is it that they're choosing to do the driver behaviours so they can do more jobs and therefore get more money? So it would be interesting to find out which way around that is. And when you do your research, if you can somehow include something so we can get that information, that would be really helpful for us as a board. But yeah, if people are content, we'll add that as a recommendation to the report today. I've got a few more councillors, but there's a few things that I just want to pull out because I think they'll also form recommendations and I don't want us to time out. You've had in the papers, one of the actions in the new action plan is to lobby on that national guidance around speed restrictions. And I wondered whether we wanted to add a recommendation that politically we think it's important to lobby around those changes to the guidance on speed restrictions so they can be more effective for our communities. Is that something as a board we're comfortable with? Yeah, great. There's also a comment around clearing sight lines, and it's how we manage to work with our private landlords that have their giant hedges on a bend that make it so that sight lines aren't clear. I'll come back if you've got any answers on that, but how we can enforce on that would be something that I wonder if it's worth us bringing back. I want to draw attention to the average speed check results. The new average speed cameras that we've had put in Leeds have made such a massive difference to the KSI data. It's absolutely wild, like the impact of those. And I just want that noted and minuted in the public sphere, how incredible that piece of work is. And when we first brought that up in 2019, there was no way it could be done because the camera partnership, West Yorkshire Camera Partnership regulations had to change in order for us to get to there. So that is a phenomenal piece of work. In terms of things that we might want to look at as a scrutiny board, it talks in the report about addressing comms and improving advertising of the Vision Zero stuff. One of the things I spoke to officers about in my chair's brief is whether or not we've looked at putting livery on the bin wagons. And I would like it to be a recommendation from Scrutiny that we go to ward members and suggest that as a ward, they may want to sponsor a bin wagon from Mice being liveried up in a similar way to what we did with the women's safety campaign, because actually getting that message around our communities on bin wagons feels really, really important. Is that something that you guys would like to task me working with the exec member on putting forward? Yeah, great. I know that the stuff around the car seats was a big part of the work that's being done to make sure our young people are kept a lot safer. And we again mentioned in Chair's brief the idea of doubling up with things like Henry. And I wonder as well whether or not there's something to be said for councillors being able to provide those opportunities to the Vision Zero team. There is, to say how much work they do, it is a very small team that do the Vision Zero work. And therefore, they, unsurprisingly, are not as au fait with each of our wards as we are. But actually, we know where those parent and child activities are. We know where they could make a real difference doing these safety checks. And us as councillors being able to provide that information feels like it would be of assistance to the team. Is that something that you're also happy to task me to facilitate? Beautiful. I think that covers everything except you guys need TikTok. And where's Arlo? That's the second thing. Where is Arlo? I made a specific request for Arlo to come to the scrutiny board and I have been let down.
I do have some information about TikTok and whether or not we could actually engage with. West Yorkshire have had great success with their young driver campaigns on TikTok, so I can circulate the results on that. And there is an opportunity for us to explore that as a Leeds based. So we will, so watch this space. And Arlo, unfortunately, is a little bit croaky today and decided to stay at home.
I'm devastated. For those at home, Arlo is our road safety mascot, our Vision Zero mascot, and is a delight. So I'll move back to the other questions. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss out on time to have those extra recommendations. We've got about 12 minutes, guys. So Leighton, Councillor Leighton, Councillor Anderson, and then I'll come to Councillor Chapman, Councillor Scopes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, but I'll be quick with them. The first about funding. So if I read the report right, 71% of incidents are occurring on C roads, which seems to be hyper local, but this is where we seem to be struggling for funding. TROs that are approved can take years to actually be delivered. I know certainly in our ward we've got a list of things to go onto TROs, so the things that they know we need to go on them, but we're told we don't know when we'll go on them because we don't know when we'll get any funding to moving forward. So that's my first question. My second question is actually about timings on crossings and how we ensure that pedestrians are prioritised. I think it's about 4 to 6 seconds for a green man, maybe 10 seconds to cross a road. Green person, apologies. Maybe 10 seconds to cross a very busy junction. And for the elderly in particular, I think this is an issue, but I feel like I've certainly had pushback from highways that actually this is a recommendation. So they're my two questions.
You'd like to come in on those?
In regards to all traffic regulation orders, We get a limited funding amount per year to promote traffic regulation orders, which generally funds around 10 of the 33 wards. All your requests go into a list for further consideration, and then each of those are prioritised and progressed. We're doing a consolidation process at the moment where we're looking to try and pick up all those wards that haven't had a TRO in the last 18 months. So I presume yours will be included in that. So at the moment, we've got a long list of requests that have come in either through ward members or through general public, where we've done some on-site observations and feels that interventions are warranted. And we're at the moment drafting those drawings to then circulate to all councillors to see if there's anything else whilst we're doing those ward TROs that you want added into those wards. So if your ward hasn't had one for the last couple of years, you will be receiving something in the next 8 weeks. In regard, going back to your hedges, Councillor Bithell, we do have powers in the Highway Act in regards to overgrown hedges. There's a process, and it's just logged through environmental enforcement, and they will then take up. There's a standard procedure to go through, and then they will instruct them, or we can carry out and then recharge the property owner. So I can direct you to that if needed. And I forget what the final. Oh, in regards to timing at crossings, so there was a report that came through to the Council's Highway Board probably about 3 years ago that looked to increase pedestrian phases, particularly city centre, to assist pedestrians cross. And that's been really quite successful. We've even got some crossings that detect when pedestrians are approaching and automatically changes the green aspect for pedestrians to cross, and stops general traffic on certain high pedestrian IG routes. If there's a particular location where you've got a concern, if you let me know, I'll report that through to the UTMC manager to have a look. Sometimes what happens, and we've recently had one incident, if one of the sensors is broken, the junction can go back to a default setting. So if someone's cut one of the detection loops, etc., and it may be that that's occurred. So without going out and having a look, it's difficult to say why that one's got a low number.
Thank you. No, email it to him. To me? We can get some data. Yeah. They're taking. Cool. Send me an email of exactly what you want, and I will get that brought and sent round. No, we don't need an example. We haven't got time. Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thanks. I'll be quick. First thing, on the Headingley corridor now, and particularly on the hedgerow, we've got issues with the disability people and these floating bus stops causing absolute havoc. In terms of cyclists don't know how to take them, in terms of they should be slowing down when they see them, but they don't seem to. They seem to just fly through. So what more can we do about that one? In terms of cyclist manoeuvres, certainly again, when I'm coming in on the Headingley corridor, I get undertaken, overtaken, I get weaved in and out by cyclists. It's as if they go through red lights, they go through when there's meant to be crossings on, they go through. We need to do something about that, because that is leading to them maybe trying to do something more seriously later on and causing problems. It'd be interesting to try and start collecting data on cyclists on pedestrian accidents, but none of them will be seriously injured. But again, if you come into my ward, you'll find cyclists using the pavement more than they use the road, which means they're coming into conflict with pedestrians all the time. When I spoke to the police about it, they say there's nothing they can do about it. So who can do anything about it? Drug driving. How prevalent actually is that? I can tell when someone's drink driving, because I can, when I'm in the pub, I can watch how much they've had to drink. But I've got no idea what somebody looks like when they've had drugs. I genuinely don't. I've never taken drugs. I've never been with anybody who's knowingly taken drugs. So how do I mean, if I saw someone drunk driving, I could, if I was so minded, report that to the police immediately. But I couldn't, in all honesty, say how I would recognise if somebody was drug driving or just about to drug drive. And in terms of the causes in paragraph 1.2, would it be possible to break down what actually the cause of those collisions were? Was it distraction? Was it driving at speed or for whatever it was? And then the final thing is, one way of solving a lot of this is if planning highways officers would actually ask for money from developers so that we could actually get some things introduced to put some of these road safety measures in. We've talked about TROs this morning. Well, one of the problems there is that the cost of TROs. So if we made the developers pay for TROs, and I've also my highways engineer is always coming to me and saying, well, when I'm complaining about the volumes of traffic and speeding, he said, well, if only we'd collected money when the houses were built in the first place, because I've had a lot of new developments in my ward, and the highways officers have singularly, this is highways planners, have singularly not requested funding for it, which has led to conflicts between my highways operations, my highways engineer, and planning, because he can't use the money when money's left over. So we need to think about these things, and that's one way we could start to put money in. Because I know a lot of the things we've heard today needing resources. Well, this is one source of it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do with those questions, because you've actually asked questions on every part of this meeting. So I'm going to hold your cycling questions till we do the active transport, because that infrastructure on cycle lanes will be covered, and then we'll bring those back in. And the planning, I will bring in on the local plan question when the planners are here. But actually, we've managed to get like red light enforcement cameras and things, so it is possible to do. We've done that in Kirkstall. There is the route to do it. We just have to know how to navigate it. I don't think councillors always know how to navigate those things. But if we could answer on the drug driving, please.
Yes, just to give you a few figures. So in the last 12 months, we've had 516 OPLs. 380 of them were alcohol and 136 were drugs. You probably think alcohol is an easier one to spot due to the manner of driving, which you'd be right in thinking. Drug driving, you're probably a little bit harder to spot, if I'm honest. You probably just class it as poor driving, depending on how much drugs they've got in the system. You'd be able to smell it if they were smoking it, which is generally what our officers do if they do a routine check due to poor driving. But there's also cocaine as well. That's a lot of people do take cocaine and get behind the wheel. That's a little bit harder. And you might be looking at dilated eyes, etc. But you as drivers would not know that unless you were really close. You wouldn't even smell it unless you were really close. So certainly for members of the public, it's a lot harder to spot a drug driver.
Thank you. I'm really aware that we've asked a lot of Vision Zero in the last 18 months in terms of extra data. So the 1.2 bit with the data that Councillor Anderson's just asked about, what are the causes behind those, I will ask for, but can we have it for when the report comes next year, rather than it being something that we ask you to do again during the year? Because at some point you have to do your actual job and not just hang out with me. Okay, next up we have got Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, and I'll try to be quick. I will be quick. First of all, there are quite a lot of children injured in these stats, looking at them, percentage-wise anyway. And I was just wondering, I know there's a programme about child-friendly Leeds and working with them. Do we use the VR technology with the kids about hazard perception? Because I have a feeling that the 12 and 13-year-olds that are riding around my ward irresponsibly and dangerously, and have been over the summer, might quite like VR technology, and it could help get them engaged before they approach driving and actually on roads and understand the impact of what they're doing. But it could be widened up into a broader subject as well about hazard perception. The other one is the very quick one about the work programme for 25-26. Could I just ask that perhaps councillors could be involved with the conversations that are going on or the plans? There's one in here specifically for Rothwell. And I know we don't talk about casework and things like that, but it's about making our district centre 20 miles an hour. We'd actually like to consider it being pedestrianised completely, and it would be good to have those conversations before this work programme gets implemented. That's it.
Yeah, I'm sure officers can get in touch with you on that front. And then the first question, please. VR.
Yeah, VR. We did have a set of VR headsets. The problem we have with them is the technology becomes outdated very, very quickly. The fire service have a set, they do utilise them. And part of the research that you're looking into at the university will be around how VR can be best utilised going forward. But that's not to say we don't ignore those age ranges. West Yorkshire, we've been very lucky to get funding from West Yorkshire within Leeds for theatre and education for year sevens, because we know young people are more at risk when they go to high school, start doing more independent travel journeys. So there is a theatre and education that covers pedestrian safety, distraction, and reactions that goes round, and we've filled all our spaces within Leeds for that. We've actually bought an additional 10 places. So we do recognise that's an issue. With regard to young drivers, we've done a lot of work at a West Yorkshire level trying to work out what is going to be the best way to reach young drivers. Gamification is obviously a huge part of the world and the language that those young people speak. It's how we best tap into that, and that is something we're constantly looking into. Apps and reward-based systems, they're the things that we do look at, but we're also looking at how are we best to develop education and training that means something, that isn't just gore or the worst thing that could happen, because a lot of work has been done that shows that that kind of approach doesn't work with young people, and actually we need to find other ways, other nudges to make it as safe as possible. It is still a nut we're trying to crack, but we are trying to, every year we try something a little bit different, and there is information in the report, and if anybody wants more information around the types of theatre and education we do. We also do a year 11 TTC driver education program. So the team that provide the driver education courses for those caught speeding, they actually go in and do a workshop for young drivers as well, those contemplating how to learn to drive. So it's not that those things aren't happening, we're still just trying to work out how, and things change all the time with regards to the best approaches, but we work as a collective with the fire and the police as well. The police have a number of education programs going into schools, as does fire and rescue. So we can provide a lot further detail, I suppose, is summing that up, really.
Beautiful, thank you. In terms of talking about tech and VR, we've been invited on a little jaunt to the university to have a go on the hazard perception task. So I will, if people fancy that, I mean, I'll be going because I love a jaunt. But if everyone else or anyone else fancies joining me on that, please reply to the email that me or Becky, probably Becky, will send out, and you guys can come and hang out with us at the university. I'm going to bring in Councillor Scopes as a final word.
Yeah, thank you. Mine are mostly comments, really. So I think the first one is around reckless driving, and I think there's something around you can't. So lowering the speed limit doesn't stop a reckless driver. So if you've got someone who's going to do 50 in a residential zone, whether the speed limit's 30 or 20, I don't really believe that affects their decision-making process. I think they're being reckless. And so I think there's just something around, actually what Paul, who gave us our training about road safety earlier in this week, said about the natural speed of a road. And I think it's very difficult to enforce compliance on something which feels instinctively unreasonable. So I think there's just something around how do we get the public on board by being or appearing to be reasonable. And I guess ultimately you could say we could keep reducing risk by making everyone go maximum of 10 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour. And I guess that thought process is what people fear. People I talk to in residents groups I go to fear that the council's trying to go down. And I think there's something around the message is we're trying to stop people dying and being maimed, aka people you know and love, not just generic person, people you know. And so trying to articulate that, but also trying to say, look, we are trying to be proportionate and measured in our approach. I think that's really important. The second thing I just want to comment on was around pavement parking. And I really get, so I went around with 2 people who have mobility challenges, and I was on a mobility scooter, and I've seen firsthand some of the challenges on pavement parking. I guess the challenge is around just space. So there are more cars, so in my area, there's more cars than there is space on the road, and and in some areas there's really wide pavement, so you can have both. So if you just say you can't park on pavements, those roads would be less safe because there was a wide pavement and now that car's on the road. And in other roads where the road isn't wide enough, you would just have people parking on both sides of the road and the road blocked. And so there's just something about how do we find a way through this, because people do have cars and they won't just disappear. Even if we say you can't park on a pavement, they won't disappear. And so there's that friction between the reality of the world and the need for people to be able to use parking spaces. And then the third one, I'm happy to pick up on the planning, but I think in the South Bank, the massive flats which don't have parking cause on-street parking and on-pavement parking. And so there's massive developments on Water Lane, which will increase parking in Holbeck by people who own cars. And so this idea that says you're within half a mile of the train station, therefore you won't own a car, is, in my view, a nonsense. And so that parking, that planning piece where we say you don't need to build car parking spaces for those flats doesn't work, and there's people parking in my ward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scopes. We will indeed pick up the planning element. Is there any comments back on any of the other comments he made? No, we'll just take those as heard. Okay, so in terms of our recommendations, members note and comment upon the report, which we've done. To comment on the new action plan, which was on page 106, which we've done around some of the ways we can support that action plan. The recommendation in relation to advertising Vision Zero messages on refuse trucks, we've agreed already. From our training yesterday, we talked about having a proposal to support the introduction of unmarked safety monitoring checks in the region. So having a mixture of the liveried speed vans and also some that are not liveried up. Are people happy with that recommendation?
I guess I'm a little bit nervous about that, if I'm honest. So I feel like one of the reasons why speed cameras have always historically been bright is because it encourages people to slow down in the moment. I'm aware that you feel that maybe if all vans might be a speed camera, that could increase compliance. But I guess I haven't seen anything. So I guess my concern is unmarked stuff feels sneaky. So I guess I wouldn't, without more information, I wouldn't be in favour of that recommendation.
I think it probably will feel sneaky, but it will only be sneaky if you're speeding. And therefore I have limited sympathy with that sneakiness. But I guess that's why originally, for full disclosure, my hoped recommendation was we got rid of all livery on speed cameras and all mobile speed cameras were unliveried. So we caught people when they choose to break road law, because it's really important that we stop having people die on our roads. However, I have been somewhat tempered by the argument that actually having them to be able to be seen is also a really good deterrent, which is why the recommendation is to support having both, because actually we want to see that the police are out in our local communities and are doing the speed enforcement, but actually having that other side as well, that means that anywhere a police speeding camera van could be feels like a tempered and compromising position to take, I guess is my argument. But as there's been dissent, will somebody want to come? Oh, Nick.
Yeah, sorry. The current guidance allows covert and overt signing in regards to the deployment of cameras and mobile camera vans. The current position is that all the mobile camera vans are fully liveried. However, in certain locations in Leeds and in other districts, they've been attacked, and the personnel have had within the vans have had paint thrown on them, etc., and tyres slashed. So that is why we are exploring other options so that we can enforce in some areas. We go out with an unliveried van so that we can reassure the public that we're still doing enforcement. but then they're not, those people in those vans are not under attack. So it's an operational decision which will be taken by the Camera Partnership at some stage, but that is what's being debated at the present time.
Thank you. That's really helpful. If anything, we should go back to the recommendation being all unliveried. But I'm happy to maintain a compromised position. So if we can vote on whether we accept the recommendation of us supporting the introduction of unmarked safety monitoring checks in the region, but not all unliveried moving forward. All those in favour? Do I get to vote? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Abstentions? 2. Okay, in which case that will be a recommendation. The recommendation to commit to the West Yorkshire Vision Zero pledge, which I know most of us have already signed, and the offer of support, the recommendation on support for councillors. We are recommending a lot.
Car seat.
Oh yes, and the car seats. So it's about us supporting officers to provide those opportunities within the ward for both comms and child seat places. Rosie?
Just quickly, there is some funding available to actually provide check-in sessions, but it's limited. So we do have some available sessions with our provider, who is Good Egg Safety, who is one of the national experts in car seat check-in, and we've been able to secure 3 extra sessions, which we've done so far in supermarket car parks. But if members have another suitable area that they could help us get into, we could certainly look at that.
Brilliant, thank you. And then the final recommendation, which was already agreed, is the lobbying on national guidance one around the speed restrictions. In which case, with that 475 recommendations, I'm going to bring this session to a close and move straight into the active travel update. And we'll just have a little switcheroo of the officers. And I'm pleased to also announce that Councillor Pryor is joining us for this one. Welcome, good sir. Okay, folks, because it's such a tight agenda, I'm going to hold on. Right, folks, I have been informed that I have forgotten an administration task, which is not unheard of for me. As a board, we have to formally note that the EHC Scrutiny provided us that report, and Councillor Galton has come and spoken on it today. Are we happy to officially note said thing? No, Councillor Scopes, you can't deny it. Perfect. Is that okay? Lovely. Consider yourself noted, Councillor Galton. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is our active travel update. When we considered the Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy Action Plan in April, we committed to receive an update on cycling infrastructure in the city. It seemed sensible to bring it to this meeting, given the clear links to our earlier discussion, which was really exemplified by councillors' questions kind of overlapping both things. Before we begin, I want to thank officers for arranging a cycling safari in advance of this. It was absolutely on point, and I am 97% sure I'm going to get a e-bike because of it, because I forgot just how nice it is to cycle around on the cycle infrastructure. some of the cycle infrastructure. I would absolutely encourage any colleagues that haven't taken part to take part moving forward. Myself, Councillor Layton, Councillor Chapman had an absolute blast. And because it's an electric bike, actually, it was relatively chill in terms of the effort required exercise-wise. We don't mention the accident. No councillors fell. The bike fell. Okay. Can I bring the meeting to order so we're not just laughing at Councillor Chapman falling? Thank you. Can we have introductions from officers, please?
Hi everybody, I'm David O'Donoghue, Transport Planning Manager.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Leanne Farrow. I'm a Principal Transport Planner.
Hello again, Kate Morris, Head of Transport Planning.
Thank you. And Councillor Pryor, do you want to introduce and make any opening remarks you'd like?
Sure. So I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Economy, Transport and Sustainable Development. So in a really brief introduction to this, I just want to touch upon why this is such important work. I think getting more people cycling, there are some really obvious health benefits for the population. There are some really obvious environmental benefits too for increasing cycling. But actually, there's a wider issue, and I'm sure all of you that have Facebook accounts will know that this is one of those hot topics which always excites people. There are lots of opinions. But when we look at Leeds, Leeds is the third largest city in the UK, second only to London and Birmingham. We're a huge city, but we've got a small city centre. And actually, one of the issues we have is an incredible number of people getting into a very small part of the city at the same time. Now, as the city grows, we're the fastest growing city in Europe. That means more people will want to get into the city centre. It simply will not work if everybody is coming in and out by car. There just simply is not the road space in the slightest. Last year, we saw a 10% reduction in the number of car journeys into the city centre, but actually we saw footfall in the city centre increase by just shy of 2%. This shows that people are choosing to use different methods of transport. There will be a few people for whom kind of using a car is as close to essential as it comes, whether that be people with caring responsibilities, nurses, for example, who've got to visit lots of different people, some certain disabilities. Actually, for those journeys to be better, we need more people to choose other modes of transport, whether that's public transport on trains and buses, but also cycling. There is a benefit for everybody if we are able to get everybody who can cycle in and out onto a bike. So there's a health benefit, there's an environmental benefit, and there's a benefit for how the city centre functions as well. So I'll leave it there for introductory remarks and pass over to officers to go into some of the detail.
Okay, thank you everybody. So we've done some slides. Thank you, Becky. You might as well go to the next one because I've introduced myself and we know the subject. So just to give you some policy context, we mentioned the Connecting Leeds transport strategy, where we have a vision for Leeds to be a city where you don't need a car, and where everybody has an affordable zero carbon choice how they travel, and active travel is integral to that. We've got a target within the transport strategy to have 4% of all trips carried out by cycle, and walking to constitute 31% of all trips by 2030. In order to do that, it's really important that we have quality, high quality, convenient and safe cycle infrastructure. We have to design cycle infrastructure that caters for a range of abilities from 8 to 80 and beyond. And it dovetails with the Vision Zero strategy that you've had a discussion about this morning. They're mutually compatible. Nationally, we have the gear change document that was set by the Department for Transport, which also has targets around cycling and active modes. The main target is around half of journeys in towns and cities to be carried out by active modes by 2030. And then emerging, we have the West Yorkshire Local Transport Plan 4, which is integral to the development of the Weaver network, is active travel provision, having a connected and coherent active travel network. And the adoption of that is crucial for future government funding. Next slide, please. So probably I didn't realise it might be difficult to see that, but how are we doing in Leeds? And I guess, you know, I can sit here and tell you we're doing fantastic and we're doing quality schemes, but there is now a national organisation that assesses this. That's Active Travel England. I'll probably refer to them quite a few times. And the image you see there is from what they call their capability assessment in 2024. That assesses local authorities' ability to deliver quality active travel provision, to plan and design active travel provision, and they assess and rank local authorities. The ranking is from 0 to 4, 4 being in the highest, and there's no local authority at the moment or mayoral combined authority that is level 4, but West Yorkshire, which Leeds part of, is level 3. So that's the highest level at the moment outside of London. We are also seeing, as Councillor Pryor mentioned, green shoots around data and performance. So local interventions and targeted interventions are seeing reductions in KSIs for cycle. We've obviously got, I think between 2022 and 24, we've seen a 20% reduction in cycle KSIs, and we've seen strong growth where we've implemented quality segregated provision. The data doesn't tell the full story, though. I think the key point is about us providing choice to the people of Leeds, giving them a sustainable choice, a sustainable option. Next slide, please. Funding has been a challenge in the past, and the graph there shows the specific ring-fenced active travel funding that comes from central government, and that's what Leeds have received since the post-pandemic.